What's up, everybody? Today I want to show in this video something that I think is very interesting about giants in the Bible. You have to note that in your Bible, um, there are two types, maybe even three types of giants in the Bible. And the reason is because the third type is sometimes the Bible will use language as giants to describe a person, not necessarily because they're gigantic in size, although there were many giants. It uses that to describe kind of their stature in life. Like the president is a giant, man, or something like that. So that's something you have to keep in mind. Although there are very few terms like that in the Bible. Usually, when the Bible uses giants, it's referring to one of two. It's referring to. Well, let's just talk about it. So as you notice here in the chart, you see Adam. Adam lived over 900 years. Now, this is before the flood. Okay. Before the flood, there was about 1,600 years pre-flood. From Adam to the flood was, I think, about 15 or 1,600 years. Then you have Noah, who lived over 600 years. And we all know the story about Noah and the ark. And then you have Methuselah, who lived over 900 years. And basically, the story goes like this. Regular humans who did not mix with the fallen angels that we read about in the Bible lived a long, long time before the flood. Can you imagine a person over 900 years old? Or can you imagine a person even over 600 years old? How big would that person actually be? So when we think of Adam in our modern day churches, we're shown a regular sized human being. And Noah and all these characters before the flood. That is not true. I do not believe that. That does not make any sense to me. Everything before the flood was much, much larger because when the flood happened, it changed the environment. It changed the everything in the air, changed the amount of oxygen in the air, the amount of carbon dioxide. The whole environment changed. And in my opinion, there are two types of giants, except for the third one when they use giants as just a term. There are really, really big normal people, and then there are really, 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 really big fallen angel mixed with human people. Because the Bible speaks about a lot of giants, but you have to think about this too. The person writing, thinking in those times, to us, hey, what's up, man? To us today, a giant would be, 7-8 feet tall. That guy's giant. Because our average height today is 5.5, 6 foot tall. But back in those days, if you were considered a giant, the normal human being like Adam or Noah, how tall could they have been? They could have been, 15, 20 foot tall? Living to 900 years, 600 years? So if one of them were to call somebody a giant, they would have to be much, much larger than 15 or 20 feet. And then you've got to think about, how did Noah, 3 of his sons, build a 500-foot gigantic wooden boat unless they weren't giants? None of us could do that. We don't have the strength. We could not do that. So these people had to be very large people. Now that's one kind of giant that was before the flood. After the flood, you see people's lifespans drastically cut. After the flood, you see people living only about 100, 150 years, something like that. Maybe 120 years. And you still see massive giants after the flood too, though. So, my question is this. Who were the other giants? There were two types of giants. The other giants are the giants that you read about in Genesis chapter 6 and Amos chapter 2 verse 9. They were called the Nephilim, which means the fallen ones. I'll read a few quick verses there. And it came to pass, when men began to multiply on the face of the earth, and daughters were born unto them, that the sons of God, that is a term used for angels. You can check Job chapter 38 verse 7. When all the morning stars sang together, and the sons of God shouted for joy. Speaking of when the earth was created, the angels all sang together, and it was the sons of God. So, again, the word angel is interchangeable in the Bible. Even David, King David, was called an angel of the Lord. So, the word angel means mediator. But it also has higher meanings, meaning a divine, supernatural mediator. So you have to be careful. Even the Bible says that God made Moses a god over Egypt or Pharaoh. And it uses a capital G in both. So is Moses a divine god? No, it simply means that God gave him power through him over Egypt. So you have to be careful because the King James Bible uses a lot of the same words for different contexts. Because we have the English version of the Hebrew Bible. And when you look into Hebrew, you notice that the words have many, many words. If for one word you could pick 10 words to use. So they picked one word to use in the King James English, and that one word has many different higher and lower meanings. Hebrew is a much more complicated and technical language than the King's English. But they did the best that they could with what they had, so that's what we have. That's why, I'm a King James only, but really when you look into the situation, for one word, there can be many different meanings. So you have to use your discernment on what the context of the word is. When it says that David was an angel of the Lord, does that mean that David was supernatural? Like a supernatural angel like we know with wings? No, it just means that he was a messenger. So you have to be careful with context. So let's get back to this. And the Lord, that the sons of God saw the daughters of men, that they were fair, and they took them wives of all which they chose. So right there you see the angels, divine, in this sense it's divine, spiritual angels coming and doing their thing with women. And the Lord said, My spirit shall not always strive with man, for that he also is flesh. Yet his days shall be 120 years. There were giants in the earth in those days, and also after that. Speaking about after the flood, and also after those days, meaning after the flood. When the sons of God came in unto the daughters of men, and they bare children to them, the same became mighty men, which are of old, men of renown. And so we have that from the King James Bible. That description of where one set of giants comes from. Now, we have another description. If you haven't read the book of Enoch, then I would go and grab the book of Enoch and read it. This is the book of Enoch, chapter 6. And it came to pass, when the children of men had multiplied, that in those days were born unto them beautiful and comely daughters. And the angels, the children of the heaven, saw and lusted after them, and said to one another, Come, let us choose us wives from among the children of men, and beget us children. And Simjaza, who was their leader, said unto them, I fear ye will not indeed agree to do this deed, and I alone shall have to pay the penalty of a great sin. And they all answered him and said, Let us all swear an oath, and all bind ourselves by mutual imprecations, not to abandon this plan, but to do this thing. Then sware they all together, and bound themselves by mutual imprecations upon it. And they were all 200 who descended in those days of Jared on the summit of Mount Hermon. And they called it Mount Hermon, because they had sworn and bound themselves by mutual imprecations upon it. And those are the names of their leaders: Simjaza, their leader, Ericabah, Ramiel, Kokabel, Tamiel, Ramiel, Daniel, Ezekiel, Barkiel, Azael, Amaros, Beriel, Ananel, Zekiel, Samskapil, Satriel, Turiel, Jomjiel, Seriel. These are their chiefs of tens. Now this is what happened. That is one type of giant also, from fallen angels and men. Now if we look in the King James Bible, in the book of Amos, chapter 2, verse 9, Yet destroyed I the Amorite before them, whose height was like the height of the cedars, and he was strong as the oaks. Yet I destroyed his fruit from above, and his roots from beneath. These are the size of the giants, from not humans, but from human and fallen angel. That is after the flood. The book of Amos is speaking of entities as tall as the cedars. A cedar gets from 80 to 150 feet. And something like that can only be derived from fallen angels. Now you might ask yourself, how did a regular human woman have such gigantic children? It would be impossible. Well, actually, what would happen is, the Bible does speak about it, is that giants, after they were born, went with other giants. So, for instance, you would have a female giant who was kind of big, maybe 10 feet, 15 feet, 20 feet. And then you would have another male giant breed with one another. And then that would produce a larger giant and a larger giant, almost like natural selection, And the human women were much smaller after the flood. However, before the flood, the human women, if they were living hundreds of years, which they were, as we could see, people were living 600, 900 years, they would be large enough to have very, very large children. Imagine a 15, 20-foot woman. She would be able to have a very large baby, 3 to 4 or 5 times the size of a baby today. And that's how it happened. Jude chapter 1 verse 6 says, The angels that kept not their first estate, but left their own habitations. So they left where they were at, and they also left their spiritual divinity, so to speak, and came into another realm of being, like the flesh, in a sense, right? Because habitation and estate, again, these words have multiple meanings, just like angel and God. They can be used in different contexts. And so that's what happened before the flood. And after the flood, there were giants. However, there are theories on how the giants came to be after the flood, because in Jude 1:6 it says that God locked up the fallen angels who did this. So somehow the seed had to carry on after the flood. There are a few theories on that. One is that Noah's stepdaughters somehow carried the seed over that were with his sons. Or the angels did it again after the flood. Or after the flood, there would have been dead giants everywhere. So all one had to do, if they had the technology, which I do believe they had high technology back then, was to find these dead giants and extract some DNA from them. And as we can see today, you can take DNA, just like in Jurassic Park, you can take DNA from something and create something from it. So a lot of people, we've been taught, they were just monkeys in caves, but actually it's the other way around. There was very high technology back then. And so it gets very deep. And then if you read an extra canonical text outside the Bible, you'll read that Noah actually took 2 other people, women, on the ark. I don't know if I believe that or not, but somehow or another, there were giants that were not the human giants that we can read about, like Adam and Methuselah and Noah. These were giants that would make them look small. Because you have to understand, if they were being called giants before the flood, these fallen angel Nephilim giants with human women, and they were considered giants compared to the people in those days, which would have been giants to us, like Noah and Adam and Methuselah. How big really were they? How big was a giant to us? If a 20-foot person is calling somebody a giant, well, Amos 2:9 says after the flood they were as tall as the cedars. So that's over 100 foot tall. That's pretty big. That's a very big entity. And if you really want to get into it, the book of Enoch says that the giants before the flood got up to, you ready for this? 3,000 ells. 3,000 ells. Ells is ELLS. Now I looked up how long an L is. And an L is about 3¼ feet long. 3¼ feet long. So according to the book of Enoch, they were like 2 miles high. 2 miles high. That's pretty big. 3,000 ells. You can look it up on Google. So that is what started me in on my journey years back, is the giants and the fallen angels. It just definitely encapsulated my mind, and that's when I started finding out about all kinds of things about the Bible and about reality and how the history of the world is written in the Bible. It's not written in history books that are made to deceive us and fool us. And there were 2 types of giants. There were human giants before the flood, and then there were giants from fallen angels and men. And there it is. So if you guys want to have any questions or comments, go ahead and DM me. Thank you.